welcome. Welcome to my levee. Oh, I'm so glad you all could be here. My husband bought this charming townhouse for my sister, but I never thought I would ever live here. You do know what charming means, don't you? I'm from the South, North Carolina born and Virginia raised. And to us, charming means small. No, it's not the presidential mansion. It is not Montpelier, but it is home in my beloved Washington City. Oh, do you like this portrait of me? What, you don't see it? Yes, of course, this is our Mr. Washington. This is not the painting that was hanging in the presidential mansion. But then again, everywhere you went back then, there was another portrait of Mr. Washington. Let me see a show of hands. How many of you have heard of Washington Irving, the author of Legend of Sleepy Hollow? And oh, some people, we need to be reading a little bit more here. Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Rip Van Winkle, yes? Okay. Well, I received this letter from him after the first time he attended one of my levees. Oh, pardon me, I still have trouble with my eyes. I arrived at the inn at dusk and understood that Mrs. Madison was to have her levee, or drawing room, that very evening. I swore by all my gods I would be there in a few minutes. I emerged from dust and darkness into the blazing splendor of Mrs. Madison's drawing room. Here I was most graciously received, found a collection of great and little men, of ugly old women and beautiful young ones, and in 10 minutes was hand in glove with half the people in assemblage. Mrs. Madison is a fine, portly dame who has a smile and pleasant word for everybody. I don't see any little men or ugly old women here. What was Mr. Irving thinking? Well, I hope you all enjoy the treats I provided. Of course, there's ice cream, especially my favorite, oyster-flavored ice cream. I don't see that well, but I can see and I hear your reaction. You know, Quakers, we use anything to flavor our ice cream. Yes, I was born and raised a Quaker. My mother was quite devout, and my father, he joined the faith because of their view on equality for all. In fact, that's part of why he moved us from Virginia to Philadelphia, because of the large Quaker population there. And in part, because he needed to support us after he sold the plantation. So off to Philadelphia we went, where Father started a starch business. Yes, I guess people used a lot of laundry starch in those days. There are a lot of things I admired about being a Quaker. Its fashions, however, were not one of those things. I would never be allowed to wear dresses with all this color. Do you like my dress? Don't you think it flatters my eyes? Can you believe? They said I showed too much of my bosom. I received this from my cousin with a letter that said, "Dolly, it is not appropriate for a first lady like thee to show off thy décolletage." I didn't know what a décolletage was till I finished the letter. "Use this kerchief to attach to the lace at the top of your dress." Does this look as ridiculous to you as it does to me? Now imagine me, a 15-year-old girl in Philadelphia, dressed in all gray from head to foot. Oh, and what do you think? Would this set a fashion trend in Washington? But I did love to walk along the riverside in Philadelphia when I was 15, even in my all-gray attire, down to my boring old shoes. Let me show you what it was like. Here, give me a little room. Oh, Mrs. Mendenhall, good afternoon. Lovely dress. Oh, and your shoes are divine. Dolly Payne, your shoes are so comfortable. Well, yes, they are comfortable. Comfortable and ugly. Oh, Mrs. Stanfield, hello. Oh, don't you look lovely? How your earbobs glitter in the sunlight. Dolly Payne, you don't need jewelry because it would detract from your beautiful eyes. Thank you, Mrs. Stanfield. What a sweet thing to say. A little detraction never hurt anybody. Oh, Mrs. Stanfield, you dropped your parasol. Here. Here you are. And do you know she did not even thank me. Instead, she said, Dolly Payne, why are you wearing that necklace? What necklace? You know Quaker girls aren't allowed to wear necklaces. No, it just may be the way my skin looks in the light. Have a lovely day. My father's mother gave this to me to wear under my clothes. Even if the world couldn't see it, I still knew it was there. Oh, those men across the street, they didn't see my necklace, did they? Well, what if they did? Take a look. Take a good look. I may not be one of your fancy Philadelphia ladies on the outside, but I surely am on the inside. I don't mind the attention of young men after all. Fashion was not the only restriction facing us Quaker girls. We weren't even allowed to dance. Oh, but when I heard music, I surely wanted to. One time I was at a social with my sister Lucy. Sister Lucy, come talk to me. Oh, isn't the music beautiful? Well, I know I can't dance. That doesn't mean my brain can't. Listening to this music makes me smile. You think I'm smiling at the man and not the music? Aren't they accusing me of flirting? No, I was not flirting with John Todd. At least no more than any other man here. It's 1789 and women, even proper Quaker women, are allowed to flirt with more than one gentleman. What makes you say I'm not proper? Oh, his curly red hair sure is something, isn't it? Well, of course it's his real color. He's a lawyer. He cannot lie. Especially not about something as important as the color of his hair. It's as true as his beautiful blue eyes. Did I say beautiful? Oh, Lucy, you're terrible. I simply said his eyes were blue. Stop making things up. You do that again, and I'm not going to introduce you to President Washington's nephew. Oh, Lucy, everybody knows you can't keep your eyes off of George Steptoe Washington. And what's worse, he can't keep his eyes off of you. All this reverie and talking is making me thirsty. Ah, Lucy, let me be the first to toast you and George. May you have 9 children. Well, Mother and Father had 8. You can do them one better. No, not I. I do not plan to get married. I do not see motherhood for me. I plan on being a doting aunt, one who will spoil your 9 children every chance I get. Oh, and Lucy, I can buy them the most colorful clothing because Mr. Washington's Episcopalian. No drab clothes for his children. Yes, I know. John Todd's a Quaker, which means drab clothes and drab children. That is not suitable for me. Well, if Mother and Father want him so much, they can marry him. Well, Lucy, in truth, with Father's business failing and Mother taking in boarders, I'd be hard-pressed to present myself as appropriate for a man of quality like John Todd. Oh, excuse me, Mr. Todd. Yes, my father's business failed, and we went into insolvency. Great debts mounted. The Quakers shunned not only him for failing to pay his debts, but his two brothers as well. Shame came on the family. Great shame. My father fell to his bed, never recovered. Toward the end of his life, he called me to his bedside. He said, "Child, come speak to me." "Well, yes, Father, what is it? What can I do for you?" "Will you do me one favor before I die?" "Oh, anything, Father, anything. Just tell me." "Marry John Todd. He is a good man, and he's a member of the Pine Street Quaker community. He has been good to our family during these hard times." I had to honor my father's dying wish, so I married John Todd in 1790. Despite my reluctance to marry, John and I did have a good relationship. And soon we were the parents of two precious boys, John Payne and William Temple. Oh, so sweet. Those sweet times were not meant to last. The yellow fever struck. We evacuated to Gray's Ferry in New Jersey with the two children and my mother, thinking the air was better. Even President Washington left town. My John, he returned to Philadelphia to take care of his ailing parents. After they died, he returned to us in New Jersey, but the fever had caught up to him. I caught it too, but somehow I pulled through. Do you know that vile fever killed 5,000 people? That is 10% the population of Philadelphia. I lost my dear sweet husband, John, and my infant son, William Temple, on the same day. I was a widow at 25. One day I was a wife with two children, and the next day a widow with one, my son Payne. I had no rights to my husband's estate or my child. He was considered part of my husband's estate. Why is it that women do not have the right to their husband's property or their child after the death of their husband? This is the way the world is for women. So I contested it in the courts. And my husband's brother James contested it right back. So I hired me the best attorney in town, Mr. William Wilkins, to fight for my rights, for my husband and father-in-law's property. And we won, didn't we? James, you have agreed to settle. I get to keep my rightful inheritance, my husband's estate, and my child. How noble of you. I've never spoken to him again. Now, after my husband died, I had my fair share of suitors. Now, I don't in any way mean to brag, but the truth is the truth. Now, I was not free with my affection with just anyone, but I did like the attention. I still do. Mr. Grove, you pouted when I came near you. Mr. Wilkins, you were smitten, weren't you? Yes, you were. And Mr. Anthony Morris, what was it you used to say? That I was the first and fairest lady of Virginia in the Female Society of Philadelphia. She raises the mercury there and the thermometers of the heart to fever heat. One time when my friend saw the line of suitors outside my door waiting to get a look at me, she said, "Dolly, thou should hide thy face. People are staring at thee." Oh, I'm so sorry. You're gonna need this. About 6 months after my husband died, our dear friend Aaron Burr took me in pain under his protective wing. He had recently lost his wife Theodosia. Soon there were rumors about us being involved. I can assure you that is not the case. In fact, do you know he is the one who introduced me to my Mr. Madison? I'd heard of James Madison, and I'd seen him at parties. He was in the U.S. Congress, and by then he was very, very famous and considered one of the fathers of the Constitution. Although if you asked him about it, he'd deny it. He was also one of the key authors of the Bill of Rights. All that, still a bachelor at 43. For our first date, I wore a mulberry-colored satin dress. After a few walks, I got this letter from my dear cousin, Catherine Coles. Mr. Madison told me that I might say what I please to you about him. To begin, he thinks so much of you in the day that he has lost his tongue. At night, he dreams of you and starts in his sleep a-calling on you to relieve his flame. For he burns to such an exhale that he will be shortly consumed. He hopes that your heart will be callous to every other swain but himself. He has consented to everything that I wrote about him with sparkling eyes. Now, after our courtship began, rumor grew quickly. So quickly, it reached the presidential mansion. The President of the United States' wife, Mrs. George Washington, summoned me there. Dolly, is it true that you're engaged to James Madison? No? I think not. Oh, if you are, do not be afraid to confess it. Oh, he would make thee a good husband, and all the better for being older. We both approve of it. The esteem between Mr. Madison and my husband is very great, and we want you to be happy. Mr. Madison poured out his undying love to me in letters until I finally agreed to marry him. I knew he would be good to my son Payne and myself. Thus began my life as the wife of a political man. After the family wedding in Harwood, Virginia, I stole away to write a letter to my dear friend Eliza Collins Lee. Harwood, September the 16th, 1794. I received your precious favor from Bath, and should have indulged myself in writing an answer but for the excessive weakness in my eyes. And as a proof, my dearest Eliza, of that confidence and friendship which has never been interrupted between us, I have stolen from the family to commune with you, to tell you in short that in the course of this day I give my hand to the man who of all others I most admire. You will not be at a loss to know who this is, as I have been long ago gratified in having your approbation. In this union, I have everything that is soothing and grateful in prospect. My little pain will have a generous and tender protector. It is yet uncertain whether we shall see you before the meeting in Philadelphia. Mama, Madison, Lucy, George, Anna, and Harriet join in best love to you and yours. Evening, Dolly, Payne, Todd. Oh, Dolley Madison. Alas! Because I married outside the Quaker faith, and I didn't wait a year after the death of my first husband, I too was weeded out of the religion. That did not bother me at all. In fact, if they hadn't told me to leave, I would have told them I was leaving. The society used to control me entirely. Not anymore. After about 3 years, my husband thought he was retiring from politics. And we moved to the family home, Montpelier, outside Charlottesville, Virginia. That retirement was short-lived. In 1801, our dear friend, Mr. Jefferson, asked Mr. Madison to be his Secretary of State until we had a place to live. He invited us to live in the presidential mansion. So off we set to the new city of Washington. And it was nothing like I expected. There were no real roads, just dirt and rocks. People complained about how unpleasant it was to live there, but not I. I saw only possibilities. What I did not expect was that Washington City loved a scandal. I know it surprises you, it surprised me too. And I never expected to be at the center of one. No, I prefer not to get involved in any scandals. I like to drive scandals right out of town. Did you hear the one about the English ambassador, Mr. Anthony Merry, who had to escort his own wife into dinner at the presidential mansion because Mr. Jefferson broke with tradition and escorted me in on his arm instead of her? Oh, Mrs. Merry was far less merry than usual. Mr. Jefferson had little regard for the ambassador, and even less for his wife. He called her a virago. Later, I had to ask Mr. Madison what that meant in case it was worse than what I thought it was. He assured me it just meant she's an angry woman. We almost went to war with England over this. But I'm going to tell you how I negotiated for peace. I invited Mrs. Merry to tea. Oh, Mrs. Merry, I am so humbled and appreciative of your accepting my invitation to tea. Indeed. Won't you please be seated? Milk? Quite. Sugar? 2. Also, lumps. I beg your pardon, 2 lumps. Oh, of course. Sorry, yes. And for the occasion, I brought in the finest British tea. It's imported. The tea may be imported, but the water is not. Oh, well, next time I'll have the water imported too. Mrs. Merry, let's talk woman to woman. You know that Mr. Jefferson recently lost his wife, and he has no one to show him the niceties. That is quite obvious. Sometimes he asks me to accompany him. Sometimes he asks my sister, Anna Payne. Indeed. It is too big a job for one of us. But with the two of us working together, we are making progress. Mrs. Madison, it is custom for the head of state to accompany the ambassador's wife to dinner. It is what is done. This is not what Mr. Jefferson did. And you call that progress? Why, land sakes alive, I mean to tell you, it was progress. Oh, you should have been here when the Danish charge d'affaires, Mr. Peterson, came to pay his respects. Would you believe Mr. Jefferson greeted him in slippers? 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 Oh, I should have liked to see that. Oh, Mrs. Madison, you are most amusing. Tell me more. Mrs. Merritt, we know each other well enough for me to tell you something just awful. What better way is there to know someone than to hear something just awful? Well, there was a rumor that Mr. Jefferson and I were... Mrs. Madison! Mr. Jefferson's old enough to be your father! Mrs. Merritt, he almost was my father. Well, what did your mother have to say about that? Clearly, she said no when he asked her. Your mother is clearly a woman of good taste to reject his offer of marriage. Indeed. Quite! Oh, Mrs. Madison, this is the most delightful day I've had in Washington City. We must do this again, and then you can tell me more things that are just awful. Oh, Mrs. Mary, it would be my pleasure. And may the good Lord help you and your sister teach Mr. Jefferson how to be a proper head of state, rather than the other end. Bye-bye. Virago. Thus, war with England was averted. Quite. It was an honor to serve as First Lady to President Jefferson, and a finer man you'd never meet. He just wanted to show the world that we were a new democracy and we made our own rules. In social circles, all are equal, whether in or out of office, foreign or domestic, and that same equality exists among ladies as among gentlemen. Despite what Mrs. Mary said, there was nothing my sister or I needed to teach Mr. Jefferson. Now, there were many things that I enjoyed during the time with President Jefferson. Lots of high points, but there were some low points as well. One of the lowest was the duel between our dear friend Aaron Burr and Mr. Alexander Hamilton in 1804. When Mr. Burr killed Mr. Hamilton, a warrant was sworn out for his arrest. The whole country turned against him. This man, who had been so kind to me after the death of my first husband, was now a pariah. I had to know what happened directly from him. I knew he'd tell me the truth. Mr. Burr, Aaron, you didn't do this, did you? You, the Vice President of the United States, challenging Mr. Hamilton to a duel. Oh, he poses no physical threat to you. And yes, he blocked you from being president, but surely being Vice President to Thomas Jefferson is not that much of a disgrace. The newspapers said that they heard there were 2 shots heard, but you weren't injured. How did that happen? Aaron? Oh, he shot first. Well, clearly he missed. Wait, you're telling me that the bullet hit a tree way above your head? Is that what you're telling me? But then you could have put the gun down. No, my Quaker upbringing has nothing to do with my reaction. Well, yes, maybe, I don't know. But one thing I know for sure is that you had a choice. Avenge your honor? You'll be forever known as a murderer. Is that honor? Oh, Aaron, we were so close. You were a tenant in Mother's boarding house. You introduced me to my Mr. Madison. You spent so much time with my son Payne. I trusted you with my only child, my most precious possession, and you shoot a man because he insulted you? Oh, tell me something. When you were shooting an unarmed man, what were you thinking about? Were you thinking about your dear wife Theodosia's memory? Were you thinking about President Jefferson? Were you thinking about James? Were you thinking about me? Or my son? You thought about honor. That's why you had all the men in attendance turn their backs to you so they wouldn't be witnesses. You could have shot in the air. And then when everybody turned around, you both would have been standing there. We could have laughed and laughed about this. Why do men put honor above life when life is so fleeting and precious? Haven't we lost enough in our lives? And now we've lost our friendship too. Goodbye, Mr. Burr. Vice President Burr was not cut out to be president. But my Mr. Madison was. His opponents called him the Great Little Madison. He was not very tall. He was also quiet and shy. So I would have parties and greet the guests and tell them what a wonderful president my husband would be. Mr. Madison and I showed them he was the 4th president of the United States in the election of 1808. And oh, his opponent, Mr. Charles Pinckney of South Carolina, he did not take the news graciously. If I'd been running against Mr. Madison alone, I would have won. Not against Mr. and Mrs. Madison. After the inauguration, of course, we had to have a party. It was the first inaugural ball in American history at the Long Hotel. Washington City had never seen anything like it. When Mr. Madison and I entered, the band played the Madison March, written just for the occasion. Ah, Mrs. Mendenhall. Your shoes look so comfortable. No, mine are not from Paris, but thank you so much for asking. Mrs. Stanfield, thank you so much for noticing that my necklace matches my new buff-colored dress. Oh, Mrs. Stanfield, you don't need jewelry. Oh, you like my turban? Isn't it divine? You men back there, take a look. Take a good look. You saw me at the inauguration. How fascinating. No, I did not know that I was the first lady to attend an inauguration. Do you think anybody's going to remember that a week from now? Oh, no, I should not like to dance, thank you. I'll leave the dancing to my sister, Anna Cutts. Mr. Madison, I should say, President Madison. Oh, I'm so proud of you. Oh, I don't care if there are 5 or 500 people here. Hold me! Oh, I have never loved anyone the way that I love you. And I've never been prouder of anyone as much as I am of you tonight. Oh, you and I are so different. But our hearts understand each other. You're joking. The National Intelligencer is calling me the Presidentress. Well, that just goes to show one should not believe what one reads in the newspapers. Martha Washington was right, you know. I never told you? When she was First Lady, she said I should marry you. Oh, and just think, someday I'll advise some sweet young thing on who to marry. But she'll never be as fortunate as I am, or as happy. I hope we feel this way forever. What a glorious night that was. I was the First Lady of the United States. And the first thing I needed to do was some redecorating. I wanted style. I wanted color. And I wanted big, bright red velvet drapes. And wouldn't you know, after a couple of parties with the congressional wives, somehow Congress found the money to support the project. And I got my red velvet drapes. Everything around and within reminds me that you are absent and makes me anxious to quit this solitude. That's part of a letter my Mr. Madison wrote to me in August of 1809, shortly after he was elected. We were seldom apart, so I have very few letters from him. Only one time were we apart for a long period of time, and it was by no means to my liking. I needed to travel to Philadelphia for treatment of my knee in weather that was dangerously hot. Oh, how I missed him so. October 23rd, 1805. A few hours only have passed since you left me, my beloved, and I find nothing can relieve the oppression of my mind but speaking to you in this, the only way. Dr. Physic called before you were gone far, but I could only find voice to tell him my knee felt better. Betsy Pemberton and Amy, my maid, are sitting by me and seem to respect the grief that I know I feel at even so short a separation from one who is all to me. I shall be better when Peter returns with news, not that any length of time could lessen my first regret, but an assurance that you are well and easy will contribute to make me so. I've set the books and notice to Mrs. D. Betsy puts on your hat to divert me, but I cannot look at her. Adieu, my beloved. Our hearts understand each other. In fond affection, thine. Oh, thank you, Amy. Atlanta. October 28th, 1805. My dearest, I reached the end of my journey on Saturday evening. Without accident and in good health. I found your friends here all well. Payne arrived about an hour after I did. Present my best respects to Dr. Physic and let me know that I shall soon have you with me, which is most anxiously desired by your ever affectionate James Madison. October 30th, 1805. I have at this moment perused with delight thy letter, my darling husband, with its enclosures. To find you love me, have my child safe, and that my mother is well, seems to comprise all of my happiness. Oh, another letter from my husband. October 31st, 1805. Your second letter, my dearest, of the 26th, continued on the 28th, is this moment received and flatters my anxious wishes and hopes for your perfect recovery and your safe return to Washington. My last informed you that I had written to Bishop Carroll with respect to pain. He was so good as to not lose a moment in attending to the contents of it. I enclose his answer. I am sorry for the delay, but a berth seems at last to be secured for our son. And I hope it will prove a fortunate one. I repeat my kisses to Miss P. I wish I could give her more substantial ones that can be put on paper. She shall know the difference between them the moment she presents her sweet lips in Washington. After I set the example on those of another person, whose name I flatter myself you will not find it difficult to guess. With unalterable love, I remain yours, James Madison. I was truly devoted to him, and he to me. After several weeks, my knee was completely healed, and I was able to return to Washington City and to my beloved husband. It's hard to believe how much this city has changed since we first moved here. I've watched this city grow, and I love it more than any other place I have ever lived. Which is what makes the events of the War of 1812 so devastating. See, the British are making many problems for the United States, including acting like pirates with our sailors, kidnapping them and treating them like slaves. My husband had to declare war on England in June of 1812. In August of 1814, the British were approaching Bladensburg. On the 22nd, Mr. Madison left to join the army there. Do you know that he is still the only sitting president who has ever joined the army on the front lines? They can call him little all they want. Any man who does that is the biggest man alive. August 23rd, at sunrise, I turned my spyglass in every direction and watched with unwearied anxiety, hoping to discern the approach of my husband and his friends. Before he left, he asked if I had the courage and firmness to remain in the president's house until my return on the morrow or succeeding day. I was confident at the time that the answer was yes. Then came August 24th. He still hadn't returned. Then 2 messengers came and said there'd been a big battle in Bladensburg and we'd lost. I had to protect our most precious possessions and important documents, including one of the few original copies of the Declaration of Independence. While I was collecting these presidential papers and our belongings, our kind friend, Colonel Charles Carroll, came to hasten my departure. Some of you may be familiar with the Colonel and the claims by the newspapers that he is the one who saved the Gilbert Stuart painting of George Washington from the presidential mansion. That impression is erroneous. I will tell you exactly what happened. Oh, Colonel, it's so good to see you. Can you please help get some of these boxes into the carriage? Well, of course I'll leave, just as soon as we get as many trunks of cabinet papers into the carriage as we can. We must sacrifice our personal belongings. There is not enough room in the wagons. Colonel, patience, please. I can forgive myself if I lose jewelry or dishes. I will not forgive myself if the British get a hold of these presidential papers and make a mockery of our government. Oh, excuse me, my servant's calling me. Yes. Oh, you found a wagon. I don't want to know how or whose. Just get as many things in as you can. Thank you, and God bless. Colonel, while you're berating me, please help me get that painting of George Washington off the wall. Well, to me it is important. If the British find it, they'll destroy it, and it will never hang in the presidential mansion again. So are you going to help me or not? Fine. Then help put some of these boxes into the wagon. And if you're not going to do that, don't stand there thinking yourself the hero for trying to force the First Lady to evacuate the building. Oh, French John, come here, I need you, quickly. Bring a screwdriver. This frame is screwed to the wall. Colonel, by the time you get the horses, this painting will be down and safe. Yes, French John, please. You can break the frame, but please protect the painting. Colonel, it is not a sign from God that the frame won't budge. I was born a Quaker. I know a sign from God when I see one, and this is not one of them. French John, please hurry. I want this down before Mr. Madison returns. Oh, why, Colonel? I do believe you're in bad humor with me. Oh, French John, please hurry. The Colonel is impatient. Thomas, please see to the door. If it's Mr. Madison, bring him to me immediately. If it's the British Army, tell them we're not home. Oh, I refuse to be intimidated by a wooden frame. Bring me a knife. I'm going to cut this portrait out myself. Yes, Thomas, who was it? A messenger. What did he say? Slow down. Mr. Madison said it's too dangerous for him to return here, and that we have to leave immediately. It's not safe for us to stay here. All right. Yes, Colonel, we can go now. Help put some of these boxes into the wagons. Get that portrait of George Washington, please. Hurry, everybody. Colonel, why are you dallying so? When we left, we took all the silver, a few books, a small clock, the cabinet papers, my red velvet drapes, and the Gilbert Stuart painting of George Washington. We left everything else. The British burned Washington. When they reached the presidential mansion, they ransacked our belongings, ate our food, drank our wine, and then set the mansion on fire. Mr. Madison and his friends headed north to a little town called Brookville, Maryland. There they stayed with a lovely Quaker couple, Caleb and Henrietta Bentley. That's where my Mr. Madison found safety. So, he named Brookville the capital for one day. August 26, 1814. When it was safe to return to Washington, Mr. Madison and I lived in the Octagon House for the remainder of his administration. When the presidential mansion was finally reopened during the Monroe administration, the Gilbert Stuart painting of George Washington was hung in a position of honor. There is but one secret, and that is the power we all have in forming our own destinies. At the end of Mr. Madison's second term in 1817, boy, was it time to retire to Montpelier. After all those years in Washington City, it was much more quiet than it had been before. No matter, it was our home, much quieter than it had been before. My Mr. Madison and I had almost 20 years there together. I would read to him every day, and he never tired of it, and I loved it. He made me feel more alive in that big empty house than 100 people could in a levee. My dear sweet Mr. Madison died almost 2 years ago. Indeed, I am but in a troubled dream at the irreparable loss of my Jenny, for whom my affection was perfect, as was his character and conduct through life. I will admit, I fell to my bed for a while. You see, Mr. Madison and I shared one heart. So when he died, mine broke in half. But I refused to end up like my father. So I rose like the phoenix and got back to living. My darling son Payne. He was all I had left. But no matter how much I loved him, I could not save him from his ways. My Quaker upbringing had no impact on him. I kept thinking, eventually, he would learn right from wrong. And he never did. I'm ashamed to admit it, but Payne when Mr. Madison died, I learned that Payne had I'll be all right. Seems that my sweet husband was protecting me from just how dishonest Payne was. He stole all of our money and squandered it. I have to sell everything to pay for the debts, including Montpelier. I had no choice but to face the truth. Congress had set up a trust fund for me, to which Payne had no access. I had heard he was going to sue over the matter, so I invited him to my very charming townhouse. Payne, it is good to see you. Please sit down. I do enjoy reading your letters, rare as they are, about your travels in Europe. That is, I did enjoy reading about them until I learned that you were traveling using money you stole from me. We gave you everything. James treated you like his own son. And I gave you all the love that I had in me. When you needed money, we gave it to you, but that was never enough for you. What is it? What went wrong? Do you really hate me that much? Oh, is that it? Your father died when you were young, and that's why you do what you do. You lost your father. I lost my husband and my baby son. No, it is not my fault that your father died. It was the yellow fever. Nobody could have stopped that. But I was there. I was there to protect you. You were not protected. You were not protected. James and I tried to protect you mostly from yourself. You took all of my money, I have to sell Montpelier just to live, and you're living your life like a wastrel. Where is it, Payne? Where is that money? My father died broken, and by God, I will not do the same, but you're doing everything you can to make sure that I do. I can't believe what you just said. You just came here to get more money. Why don't you just take everything? Why don't you take the old clothes, used furniture? Why don't you take the Gilbert Stuart paint and the George Washington? Take everything, because I have nothing left, not even my son. When you leave, don't slam it. I can't tell you how much it means to me that you all came here tonight. I know you've been worried about me. Just want you to know I'm going to be all right. Yes, these are the most challenging times I've ever had to face. I've lost my greatest love, my only child, and my home. But I have not lost my dignity. And I will always cherish the love of those who have given of themselves to support me. There's a lot of life left in this old girl yet. More than can fit in the presidential mansion and Montpelier combined. Let's raise a glass to the first of many levees in my charming townhouse. And there will be many more. Because Dolley Madison is a survivor